Following Sophie Calle through Venice in episode 5 got me thinking about how we look at things, how our attention flickers, what catches us, and what we just let slide by. The way she trailed Henri B was all about the small stuff. The way he leaned on a bridge railing, the quick pause before stepping into a narrow calle, the faint shuffle of his footsteps echoing off stone. Being in her company, even just in thought, made me more aware of the air in those streets, damp from the canals, heavy with salt, and of the spaces in between what we see. It left me wondering, what happens if sight itself is gone? So this episode of Photography and Walking is brought to you from Venice, where we are asking, what could it be like to walk La Serenissima without seeing? That question, what would it mean to move through Venice without seeing, brought me to one of Sophie Calle's other early projects, Les Aveugles, or Blind. In 1986, Calle met people who had been blind from birth and asked them what they thought beauty was. She photographed their portraits, printed their answers alongside, and paired each with an image of what they described. Sometimes it was a color, sometimes a person's face, sometimes a feeling, a hand on the shoulder, the warmth of the sun. What's striking is how those answers shift the whole idea of looking. Beauty wasn't always something to be seen. It could be something to be felt, remembered, or imagined. And the photographs, their faces, their words, the accompanying images, make you think about how much of our seeing is habit. How much we assume that vision is the default, as if it were a universal measure. Coming to Blind after walking with Sophie Calle in Venice feels like flipping the city inside out. The narrow passages, the sudden openings onto canals, the faint bells drifting across the water, all of it could be there without the insistence of sight. Calle's work pushes us to consider how perception rearranges itself when the visual is absent, and how walking can become a different kind of listening. In his book Confronting Images, Georges Didier Huberman contrasts the détail, which he calls a thread, with the pont, a filet of red paint. The détail is what holds a picture together. In Venice, it might be a gondolier's striped shirt, the curve of his oar, or the arch of a bridge, clear threads that let you read the scene. The pont, by contrast, is the jolt, a streak of red graffiti, or sunlight flaring off the canal. It doesn't explain Venice, it disrupts it. And it's hard not to hear Roland Barthes in this. The punctum, that sharp, subjective sting in a photograph that jumps out at you. The pont carries a bit of that energy, a tension that comes to mind again when I think about Carmen Papaglia's Blind Field Shuttle. Papaglia, a Vancouver-based social practice artist who calls himself a non-visual learner rather than blind, is devoted to rethinking access and perception in space. Blind Field Shuttle began in 2010, has been repeated in multiple cities worldwide over the years. It is a non-visual participatory experience in which groups of people, blindfolded, advance together through public space. It comes to mind because of how it choreographs blindness as a collective walk. Papaglia has done it in Vancouver, London, New York, and other cities, but not Venice as far as I can tell. That also reminds me of an earlier student project, this one by Tony Hill at London's St. Martin's School of Art in 1970. It was titled The Blind Leading the Blind, and here a line of blindfolded participants moved through the city together. Both works echo what I'm trying to imagine in Venice, not seeing but walking, whether individually, as I will be, or collectively, as in their pieces, as a way of experiencing public space differently. And in those pieces, the photos aren't the main thing. They're just the trace that shows it happened. So, in a city designed for the eye like Venice, Papaglia's gesture, that disruptive splash of non-visual awareness, is even more resonant. Walking without sight in those alleys, the city gets flipped inside out. Papaglia's Blind Field Shuttle turns the usual order of things upside down. Sight takes a back seat, and suddenly the city reveals itself through sound, touch, even smell. And that makes me think of sociologist John Urey's idea of the tourist gaze. Urey says tourism isn't just about where we go. It's about a learned way of looking, a set of expectations about what's worth seeing. We arrive somewhere already primed for certain sights and often miss everything else. Papaglia's walk breaks that loop completely. Without the crutch of vision, the must-see dissolves, and the city becomes an uncurated experience. In Venice, a place where the tourist gaze is almost a profession, the idea of moving without looking feels radical, almost a way of stepping out of the postcard and back into the street. Blindfield shuttle slows the walk down so much that vision itself begins to shift. In a way, the opposite happens when photographers pass through quickly. Without time to understand the place, their images risk becoming surface impressions. That's the tourist gaze. They might still have agency as photographs, but they're closer to snapshots of passing moments. As we saw in episode 1, Mary Ellen Mark worked differently. She returned, stayed, listened, and let the images grow out of that time. That's a different rhythm. One I'll be testing in my own way here in Venice by removing sight altogether. That kind of commitment, of standing still long enough for the place and its people to enter the frame, is something I've been thinking about for months while planning this trip. I wanted to find a way to explore that same slowness here in Venice, in real time, as part of an in situ piece. But first, a note on Venice. I'm conscious of the tensions around over-tourism here, and I've tried to approach the city with care, and letting the work itself reflect the fragility of a place that is so often consumed rather than encountered. So, with that in mind, the plan is rather simple, but not easy. I've brought back Walker at Work, my antonym for this piece. At the steps of Santa Maria della Salute, where the Grand Canal meets the lagoon, I stand for 36 minutes blindfolded. Each minute, I snap a photograph. My handheld camera is pointed differently each time at what I can't see. This is where I stand for the entire piece, without moving from my spot. A metronome marks each passing minute, and at each signal, I take one photograph. Not composed through a viewfinder, but triggered by what I'm hearing, feeling, and sensing in the air. The shuffle of shoes on the ground, a burst of voices, the scrapping of a metal passerella sliding between the fondamenta stone and a vaporetto. The framing belongs to chance, to whatever drifts towards me in that minute. The blindfold flips Venice inside out. The postcard views disappear. There's no romantic gondola, no perfect light, only what drifts towards me when the metronome clicks. Instead, there's texture, damp stone underfoot, the way a voice echoes against brick, the shift in air when someone passes close. The photographs that come out of this are traces of those moments, but also records of a different kind of presence, one that refuses the spectacle and leans into listening. That slowness makes me think of Gabriele Basilico, an Italian photographer who also fixed his eye on Venice, though in a very different way. In 1998, during the Venice Biennale of Architecture, he turned his lens on the city with a deliberate, almost architectural patience. Basilico wasn't chasing events or romantic moments. He was mapping space. Facades, water lines, the way buildings settle against the light. His photographs aren't hurried glances. They're the result of standing still long enough for the scene to settle into him before he pressed the shutter. That's the kind of attention I want here, even if my eyes are covered. Carmen Papaglia's walks, Mary Ellen Mark's time in Bombay, Gabriele Basilico's patient mapping, all of them push against the fast look, the must-see, the quick capture. My 36 minutes blindfolded is my own version of that resistance, a way of asking what it means to be in a place without scanning it for the view. And maybe that's the bigger question under all of this. When we slow down, when we look away from the obvious, or stop looking altogether, what else comes into focus? Not in the frame, but in ourselves. This is Photography and Walking. I'm Philippe, and this has been Blind in Venice. Every walk is different. I'm glad you joined me on this one. Next time we'll stay with water, but in a very different way, walking alongside Alan Sekula. You can see the photographs from my Venice piece at photographyandwalking.com and on Instagram.